broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. This is Mona Cornock. I'm a staff person with Municipal Relations, and I'm really happy that you joined us to just explore some questions and answers about the new Building Sustainable Communities Grant Program. Just so you're aware, we're going to keep all of the participants muted just to reduce feedback and disruptions during the presentation, but I'd encourage you to use the chat feature on the webinar to ask questions, and we will deal with questions that you put forward at the end of the presentation. If we happen to run out of time at the end of the presentation to answer all of the questions, please be assured that we're taking note of all of the questions that are being asked, and we'll get back to you following the webinar. So we're really looking at not the details of the program, but rather some of the questions and answers that have been asked about the program since we launched it on April the 4th. The new program is part of Manitoba's commitment to renew community development programs in the province. And the new grant program, the Building Sustainable Communities Program, is intended to promote community capacity and sustainability, to leverage partnerships to serve the needs of neighborhoods, communities, and vulnerable Manitobans, and to promote positive outcomes for communities. The Building Sustainable Communities Program is project funding, and it will fund a similar range of projects as previously funded under the Community Places Program, the Neighborhoods Alive Neighborhood Renewal Fund, the Neighborhoods Alive Community Initiatives Program, Hometown Manitoba, Community Planning Assistance Program, the Community Support Small Grant Program, and the Partner for Growth Program. So those were 7 programs, and this program is replacing those 7 programs. In terms of improvements, we feel we've got a more streamlined and flexible program for applicants. So there's not the rigid requirements of the individual programs that we need to be worried about any longer. We've also introduced a simplified application process with less red tape for communities. There's less steps required in applying, and the requirements have been reduced from what previously was included in some of those grant programs. We're also excited because it's now accessible via a new one-stop website, the Manitoba Grants Online, which includes not only this grant, but other Manitoba grants that are being offered to communities and citizens. The new program is intended to be responsive to neighborhood, municipal, and regional priorities, similar to some of the other programs, although many of the other programs were more restricted in their outreach. Projects can span 2 fiscal years, which is different than many of the previous programs where the projects had to occur and end by March 31st. This will allow for more flexibility for projects that might run between February and June, for example, or over 2 fiscal years. And so the time is expanded, and then the March 31st deadline that used to cause some problems is no longer going to be a problem for us. There's also a higher maximum grant amount versus some of the previous grants. So some of them had a $5,000 limit, and now we've set a standard $75,000 maximum grant limit under the program. We're also committing to doing 2 intakes per year at set predictable times so that clients and groups and organizations can anticipate and apply in the intake that they think is most feasible for their project. In terms of the types of projects that can receive funding, as I said before, we're funding the similar kinds of projects that were funded under those 7 grant programs previously. It includes, but is not limited to, new community and regional initiatives, activities, or training that support the development of leadership, organizational capacity, and positive community outcomes. A variety of planning, feasibility, and needs assessment projects could be applied for under the new program. And it'll also fund capital projects that add to, extend, improve, or enhance existing community facilities and spaces. So it's very similar range of projects. And again, this is not an inclusive list. So if you have projects that don't fit neatly into one of those three categories, please do submit that project anyways. What has changed about project funding? Well, in most cases, the size of the grant has increased and now provides a maximum grant of up to $75,000. There's a maximum of 50% of eligible project costs that will be supported through the program. And a minimum of funding must come from non-government sources. So we'll talk about non-government sources in a minute, but the only exception to that is that any planning project does not need to meet the 10% minimum non-government source project funding. So what are non-government sources? Many of us automatically jump to private source capital, but it can include a variety of sources. Proceeds raised, for example, through fundraising activities, both small and large, are eligible as non-government sources. Some groups receive revenue from social enterprise activities or from memberships, so that would be also included. Donations that we receive from individuals, businesses, or other supporters for a project would be considered non-government sources. And funds that organizations might receive through another charity organization, a community foundation, or a service club are examples of some of the non-government sources that groups can use to meet that 10%. Another question we're getting, what if we are unsure if we'll be able to raise the funds? Well, still put in your application. We encourage you to do so. And we have staff across the province that can help identify possible sources of funding that you might want to explore. Or we can also provide you some tips and strategies to use in fundraising, in approaching donors, or in raising these funds. And so can maybe identify some sources of funds and some means and strategies to try and approach those sources. A common question we're getting, are staffing costs eligible under the program? Are those costs eligible? Salaries, wages, and mandatory employee costs can be an eligible expense if the individual is employed specifically to deliver the project. The BSC fund cannot be used to fund core salary expenses for long-term or ongoing positions that are required beyond the time frame of the project, but any specific salaries and wages to deliver the project can be eligible. Another common question we're getting is, do all financial resources need to be confirmed before applying? Funds do not need to be confirmed at the time of application, as we realize that although we may have applied to a community foundation, for example, for funds, groups may not have heard back from the community foundation. So we do not need all of the funds to be confirmed, but just identified where you're anticipating getting the funds to complete the project. The readiness of the project and the strength of the plan and the project will be considered in our evaluation. However, we won't decline applications if they don't have the matching funds in place at the time of application. Another common question is, why is funding limited to projects that have operated for less than 2 years? The Building Sustainable Communities funds are intended for projects and are not meant to act as core sustaining dollars for ongoing programs. Projects that build on an existing program could be eligible if that project introduces a new element to a program and has a sustainability plan beyond the project funding. So it's intended to maybe provide some startup funds or some piloting of a new program, but it's not intended to be a core sustaining dollars for ongoing programs. When do we expect to get our money, or when do project funds flow? 60% of the approved funding will be provided upon signing of the project contribution agreement with the client. The remaining balance of up to 40% of the approved funding will be available following project completion and submission and acceptance of the final reports. And the final reports include both a financial report and a narrative report that will be part of the agreement, the project contribution agreement. And just to note, all projects are subject to audit by the Manitoba government. When can I apply? As many of you might be aware, applications for the first wave of grants are accepted until May 22nd. So midnight on May 22nd, which is next Wednesday, is when we're going to close off the first wave. But if you don't meet that, applications will be again accepted for a second intake that will close on December 15th. It's part of our plan to do that regular intake and on a twice-a-year basis. Just so you know, program guidelines and applications are available at www.manitobago.ca. And you'll see there not only the Building Sustainable Communities program, but other programs as well that are available through the Government of Manitoba. And you can submit, there will be a submit button when you go to the application on that website, and it will go to the bsc@gov.mb.ca website. So you can submit it directly from the website or download it and submit it to that address. Where can I get more information? Well, the program guidelines, frequently asked questions are available on that Manitoba Go website. And again, we've put it up here for you to note. But we also have staff that are available to help groups and with your applications and to answer questions. And I'm just going to give you a list. They're located across the province. So you might want to note the person nearest to you. And I'll leave that up for you so you can scan. You don't have to worry which region you're actually in. You can, I think we're quite flexible in terms of the regions, but if you know which region you're in, then you can probably contact the person here, and there's their phone numbers and email addresses. Just while we have your attention, we wanted to remind you as well, if you haven't heard or some of you may have heard, that we're also engaged in a process, a consultation process on the capacity of the not-for-profit sector. And we're encouraging you to give input into how to build capacity and promote sustainability in Manitoba's nonprofit sector. And there's an online survey and a consultation document that is available at the following address, www.gov.mb.ca/mr/. And the consultation document and survey are on that site. And the survey is open until June the 30th. So you have until that time to provide your input in how to build the capacity and promote sustainability in the Manitoba's not-for-profit sector. So I encourage you to go to that site and read the consultation document and provide your input at that site. So that's what we wanted to